All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming this evening to our biannual presentation of the Lavine Lecture Series, tonight with our featured speaker, Julia Weist. I'm Emily Garner, the Senior Manager of Campus and Public Programs here at the MIT List Visual Arts Center, and I'm excited to bring this program to you tonight, so thank you for attending this evening. And I'm equally excited to welcome Julia Weist as part of our featured artist speaker tonight. Tonight's program will consist of about a 45-minute lecture with time for audience Q&A. And following the program, we'll ask you to join us to our reception upstairs in the upper lobby if you'd like to join us. And I'll have time for that. I'd like to take a moment to ask everyone to please silence their cell phones, and anybody that would need to use the facilities during the point of the lecture, it's up outside the theater to the right before the elevators. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Cassidy Westjohn, our program coordinator at the List Visual Arts Center, and Sarah Schmidt, a student associate here at the List Center, for their assistance in helping and support tonight. And also MIT Video Productions and the audiovisual departments for their technical support. The Leroy and Dorothy Lavine Lecture Series was established to honor the Lavines, two prominent Boston art patrons and longtime supporters of the MIT List Visual Arts Center. The Leroy and Dorothy Lavine Lecture Series is a biennial endowed program meant to bring distinguished art world figures for talks on modern and contemporary art to the Boston community. So I'm excited for tonight for Julia Weist is a visual artist based in New York, and her artistic practice is defined by a participatory aesthetic in which her artworks are shaped by the systems they are foregrounded on as subjects. Across various mediums, with the recent focus on photography, Weist is known for her deeply collaborative approach that emphasizes discovery as a defining factor in shaping material choices, formal qualities, and display strategies, and she'll share some of that tonight. Her work is in the MIT List Visual Arts Center permanent collection, as well as part of the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Museum of Modern Art, Guggenheim Museum, Brooklyn Museum of Art, Institute of Chicago, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts and Jewish Museum, among other collections, both nationally and then internationally. She's recently had a nice, or at least a couple years ago, recent solo exhibitions include Private Eye at the Moskowitz Bays Gallery, and we'd like to welcome Meredith here tonight, and Governing Body at the Rachel Uffner Gallery. Her latest public artwork campaign was also debuted in the Times Square in 2022. So I'd like to have Julia join us now and share about some of her recent body of work and what she's been working on lately. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Do I need to switch over the PowerPoint? Here, we can do that. Down, I got it to the bottom. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let me just get this set up. Okay, does that look good? All right, hello. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. I'm gonna start tonight with this work that's on the screen because it is the piece that Emily mentioned that's in the collection of the List. It's installed, I just learned this, I didn't realize it was still on campus, but it is installed also in the Hayden Library. So maybe some of you have seen it. So I want to start there because I think it's a great opportunity to share some more info about this piece that maybe you've seen, but also the project that this piece comes from, the body of work, is really the thing that set me on the trajectory to make the work I'm making in this exact moment in my studio. And so it's a nice kind of intro to what I've been thinking about for the last 5 or 6 years. So the body of work that Rubrics, that piece came from, is called Public Record. I created this while doing a residency in the New York City Municipal Archive. So this is an archive of government records created by the City of New York. It is extensive. You can see there's formats, everything you can imagine, basically. And it's a challenge for researchers because only a small portion is cataloged and almost none of it is digitized. So these kind of corridors you're seeing full of material, everything that's in these corridors is accessible to the public But these physical spaces are not. I got special access through this residency, which made doing the research significantly easier because I could rifle through a box that I just found on the shelf and open it up and see what was inside. And for example, sometimes I found things like this, which is a receipt from 1883, or a register of voters from 1894. But I realized quite quickly that I was more drawn to the contemporary material. So this is, for example, a box full of letters written to the previous mayor of New York, David Dinkins. And specifically, I was interested in finding myself or finding my people in the archive, by which I mean other artists, how artists have interacted with government, how government has recorded them, especially in New York City, which is considered, such a cultural capital. And I was able to find a significant amount of information about artists. Some was really salacious. So like on the left, we see Jonas Meekis's mugshot and some notes from an undercover officer who went to his film screening and took notes, did a little film criticism in order to arrest him. And then on the right, we have what's maybe a little bit more typical for how artists appeared in the archive. Very dry, very bureaucratic material, mostly text, that contained a lot of interesting information, but was not super compelling visually, or at least on its face. So I also was taking a close look at the aesthetics of the system and the archive, drawn to the kind of visual markers, the fonts, the colors, the things that organized the space. So for example, this is a record retrieval slip where members of the public fill out what they're interested in researching, they turn it in, and they get the materials in exchange. And so I thought maybe I could cut up these retrieval slips and use them to kind of crop and annotate the material that I was finding just down to the most essential part. And that I thought maybe that would help with the fact that some of it was quite dry and dense. So I had a kind of studio during this residency. It used to be a chemical darkroom, now it's a digital darkroom. For those in the audience that know anything about photography, this is a very, very fancy copy camera. It's a medium format digital camera that they use to digitize what they do, pull from the archive. And I realized that I could use this to make artwork based on my research. And so Rubrics is one of those pieces. And just to kind of explain what you're looking at kind of logistically here, it is a physical collage, a physical arrangement of my research items that I pulled in the course of the residency, overlaid with these slips, and then turned into a photograph. It's very trompe-l'oeil. Most people, when they see this, even in person, think it's a collage. That's why I always try to stop and remind people that it's a photograph. So Rubrics in particular was concerned with systems of evaluation that government created, or specifically the government of the city of New York created, in order to determine the value, the quality of artists and artworks, which of course is an impossible task. You can't just build a system that, or build a machine that you can put an artwork in and then get a grade or a numerical value out the other side to tell you if it's good or not. But you can see that they tried. And what I love about some of these items is you can see the failure in real time. So in the center, they developed a numerical system, which clearly failed, because then you also have 24 plus plus instead of just 24, and then you have 28 plus, and then you have 32 crossed out becomes 28 with a diamond, right? What does that mean? It just shows that the numbers are not doing the job on their own. Sometimes they're these kind of report card style. We have the symbols return, we have double checks, checks, stars, and then even natural language, right? So in the upper right, we have great, no, so. And the reason I really love those is they all have exclamation points, even the so. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but it's a highlight for me of Rubrics. So for each work in this series, there were 11 photographs total. They each are concerned with one type of interaction between artists and government. So Rubrics was about evaluation. This piece is called Definitions, and it's just an aggregation of attempts to define the words art, artist, and artwork. seems quite simple on its face, right? But you can imagine that the Department of Employment and the Department of Cultural Affairs might have very different definitions for those, and especially over large spans of time. So there are many decades represented in the material of this piece. This work is called Critique. It aggregates examples when officials had to do the thing that we do in art school, where you look at something and you crit it. You give it a sort of verbal feedback, or in this case, textual feedback. But the reason I thought this was interesting is often the folks who were writing these critiques were not actually in a position that typically made them interact with artwork. So maybe it was an official at Department of Transportation who was doing a commission in the subway, or an executive from a public hospital buying a work for the lobby. And so I just found the language like very fresh because it was not typical for what you would find in those contexts, and then also sometimes like quite problematic. Okay, so the last work I'll show from the series is called Demonstration. I want you to kind of keep this work in your brain because we're going to return to it, but the theme here is instances when artists were surveilled, arrested, defunded, fired, if an agency was in the position where they had artist employees, for being subversive in their activity or their work. And so you can see there's a real trend here of there's lots of different systems of evaluation, and sometimes they're as neutral as like putting a number on the quality of an artwork. Sometimes the evaluation is like, this person should be arrested. Okay, so I don't typically make something in my studio and have it go directly to the wall of a gallery or a museum. Typically, I try to stuff it into a system and then wait for it to come out the other end and then put it on the wall. So this project was no exception. And I started thinking about the material that was actually in the compositions, like the physical items that I was photographing, and thinking about how they got there. Like, how does something become a government record? How is it that literally, in some cases, hundreds of years later, I'm able to access it? And I started doing some research just about like what the process entailed, including reading this very dry New York City Supplemental Records Retention and Disposition Schedule. And I kind of made a checklist of things that I could do that would suggest that my artworks were actually government records, because I did make them through a government-funded residency that involved me like embedding inside of an agency of city government for a year. And so I did all sorts of different things, including writing a memo to the commissioner of that agency, which is called the Department of Records and Information Services, kind of saying, I hereby transfer this work into your custody, like all of these different things. And I was successful. They determined that my artworks should be classified as government records. And you're probably hearing this thinking, why does she care about, like, what is it about government records that's like at all exciting outside of the, sort of research I had already done? And the reason is that there are a whole suite of laws that govern how government records have to be processed, kept, made accessible. If your artwork can become that, all of a sudden your artwork is under like legal protection, essentially. So when this has probably been in people's popular imagination the most is like with Hillary Clinton's emails. People remember this when James Comey thought she maybe accidentally or purposefully deleted 30,000 emails. That was a big deal because that would be illegal, right? Or like when President Trump took some souvenirs from his first presidency, and then the National Archive had to spend all of this energy trying to get them back, because you can't just take things like that. They have to go into a government archive. But probably the term that would mean the most to most people here is FOIL, Freedom of Information Law. Has anyone ever done a FOIL request? Yes, okay. There's usually one person in the audience who has done a FOIL request, so thank you for being that person. So a FOIL just basically means that you exercise your right as a citizen to see a government record. It may have not already passed through this whole complicated system to get into the archive. The archive tends to be the historic material. There tends to be like a 30-year gap between when something is made and something makes it into the archive, because it's retained by the agency before it's transferred. The idea here being like maybe they need it for their work, right? It's like a live record. But even before it's gone into the archive, you can just request it. You can request anything. You can say, you can say government of the municipality of Cambridge, let me see your emails from the budget vote last week or whatnot. And it's a really important mechanism for transparency, for accountability. And in my case, it was a method of presentation because members of the public could use the Freedom of Information Law FOIL to say, I want to see Julia Weist's artwork, and you also need to give me a high resolution copy of it, which of course is not typically something that happens. We control the circulation of the images of artworks. But so here's a screenshot from New York City's FOIL portal where somebody said, I want to see demonstration, that's the one with Jonas Mekas, and the government, gave them these high resolution files. So I spent all this time thinking about the public record information that's legally protected to be transparent and open and accessible. And I started thinking about the counterpoint to that, which is information that legally has to remain private. And I didn't know much about it, but I thought, let me just sort of look into the legal framework on that side of this scenario. And very quickly I realized that there was one category of citizen that had sort of special access to private information, and actually that anyone could try to become one of those people, because every state allows you to apply to become a PI, private investigator. Not everybody will be approved, but anyone can apply. So I thought, why not? Let me apply to become a PI. So this is the first page of my application. The application was very extensive. I don't want to make this seem like anyone can just wander in. They require 6,240 hours of professional experience, of qualifying experience. And I submitted tons of paperwork that showed that for more than 6,000 hours, I have been an artist with an investigatory practice. I took an exam, a PI test, and I passed. I did an FBI background check, which I also passed. And then in November 2022, I received this in the mail. This was my PI license. And I was definitely surprised, but I always, when I say this, that I was surprised, and you'll understand why I'm being careful with my language here in a little bit when I talk about where this went. I'm careful to say that I was surprised because I had just very recently spent a year looking at how confusing artists were to government. The whole archive is, look at the piece definitions, is they can't even define just the word artist, right? So I did not assume that I would have put in this application and they would immediately be like, I understand why this person deserves to be a private investigator. But they did. So I gladly took the license because I realized that it allowed me access to this private record. And it probably doesn't surprise you that in America, the private record is owned and operated by corporations. So these are some of the corporations that create database products where you can look up, any American and see sensitive, non-public details about their life. So I subscribed to one called IRB Search, mostly because it was the cheapest. And I just thought this was a great line, because I was like, I am special. Yeah, thank you. So this is the first artwork I made as a licensed PI. This is a self-portrait. And this is all the data I was able to, actually it's a subset, but it's sort of like a range that shows you all the data that you're able to purchase about people as a PI. So it's everything from where I've lived for the last 30 years, to my IP address, to how much money I made in a job 20 years ago, to everyone I've ever met, basically, everyone I've ever lived next to, my family, and so much more, including these images of where my car had been for the last 36 months. So this, visually, you can see there's a relationship to the last project. It's a photograph of a physical collage, and it uses these kind of bureaucratic slips, in this case they're logs, to obscure and reveal parts of the material that's on here. I also used the New York State brand guidelines. So New York State has a brand, it's got colors, logos, fonts, and I use that to inform the aesthetics of the work. And the reason that I have to have these log slips, or in general why it makes sense that a PI would have logs, is that it's actually legally required that you retain an accounting of all of the searches you've done in this private record. And specifically the law, there's 2 federal laws that govern when you can access certain information, and they have all these permissible purposes. So for example, if you're representing someone or you're looking, on a client's behalf into like a housing matter, employment, financial relationship, litigation, there's sort of categories when it's allowed. And one of the categories, of course, is you can look at your own information. And so the logs are important to capture the way that you are doing these searches within the bounds of the law. So here is another work I made, again, obscuring and revealing information. A lot of the information in PI databases are about hard assets, so cars, residences, things like that do kind of come up again and again. And in one system within IRB search, I noticed, that's focused on cars, I noticed kind of loopholes in these systems where there were elements of the data that actually were not governed by federal law. And so one of those examples are tools where you run a car's license plate. So you enter a vehicle's information, you press enter, and then you get a huge trove of these images showing the cars on American roads. So what you're seeing is, in the detail shot on the right, the image you get of the car, and then a satellite view that the system gives you to show you where that photo was taken. And this is also, it goes with tons of metadata, like how frequently that car has been seen at that location, is it frequently seen there like at night or during the day, all sorts of info. So that's, kind of scary enough as is. But I also noticed that the system had what I think maybe they believe is like a feature and not a bug, but I was just experimenting with it and I realized actually you could search for any text. It's meant for license plates, but you can search for any text. So in this piece, I searched the word proud. And what I got was this huge trove, of which this is a subset, of images of cars with proud on a bumper sticker somewhere on the vehicle. And there's a real ideological range here, from proud ally to proud to hire American. And then also you can see there's a real range of ecology. I wanted to show the geographic diversity. This is not a phenomenon that happens like in one neighborhood, in one city in America. Visually, you can see it's like the desert, the mountains, the Gulf Coast, like it's all in there. Here is another search for the word believe. And this piece was important for me because it shows there doesn't even have to be a car in the photo. So like the bumper sticker, there's a vehicle that's sort of like shifting its gaze, but here there's just not even a vehicle present. So we see people's cross-stitched pillows on their front porch that say the word believe. Someone on the right, you can see in the detail, is just wearing a sweatshirt that says believe. And I started wondering, how does this system actually function? What is actually taking these images, and how quickly is it updated, and how long are the images kept? And I started looking into it, and it might surprise you, but actually this is the camera that takes these images, not the satellite view, obviously, but the image that returns from your search. And these cameras are meant to be mounted on vehicles. They're mounted on police vehicles, but most frequently on tow trucks. And the way this works is that a tow truck, especially a repo truck, is circling around all day looking for cars that have a bounty on it, because they're trying to return that car for the bounty. And the system that they use requires that they have something that alerts them when they've driven by a car that has a bounty on it. So these cameras are capable of doing that, right? Scanning the license plate, saying, oh, there's one, beep, beep, beep. They don't have to take a photo of every single thing that they pass, but there is money to be made in that. And so Motorola Corporation developed that technology so that the tow truck drivers get the alert and then they get all of the photos. So I spent a lot of time talking to tow truck drivers, kind of on the ground, trying to understand how this works. So much so that I started thinking about these cameras as any other camera in my life as an artist. Can I use this camera to take pictures? Can I make work for the view of this particular camera. So the first thing I did was I sat on the sidewalk outside of one of the repo yards that I knew participated in this system, and I just waited for the tow truck to drive by me. And then I ran the license plate of the car I was sitting next to and found this image of myself. So I ran KGR 6660 New York plate, and there I was. And then, of course, I appropriated the image as my own artwork. So, the different interventions I did for the gaze of this camera, again, I would stage something and then I would run the license plate that it was next to. Some were more confrontational, some were more kind of like poignant and grieving. Some also tried to show the system at work. So I was interested in having the tow truck be in the photo that it took. So I put like this mirror on my car so it would reflect back the moment of photography. And it's a little hard to see here. It's easier to see when this work in person. But I did capture the tow truck. It's there on the right, but I wasn't totally satisfied that, I had gotten all the information there was to demonstrate about this tow truck in this one image. So I was thinking about it, and I tried all these different things. I put a ton of mirrors on the car, and then the camera got really confused because it was like reflecting the sky, so it sort of wasn't sure what it was looking at. That didn't work. And then, I had been just sitting on the sidewalk outside of the repo yard, and I thought, oh my God, the tow trucks themselves have license plates. I can just run the license plate of the tow truck and see photos that they accidentally took of each other. So that's what I did here. This is called Watching the Watcher. And you can see actually in this photo taken by another tow truck of tow truck 182TT, that the cameras are very well documented in this photo. But also there's just so many moments that were like incredibly uncanny and kind of strange. Like this is a photo that one truck took of its driver. This is a photo that one truck took of another truck's driver. And there's just this kind of like strange intimacy of like figuring out how these folks worked with these vehicles through the system that the vehicles was perpetuating. Okay, so I probably don't need to spell it out why this is scary, especially when you can search for any text in public, right? So these are just two images, one for and against Planned Parenthood, political candidates. And I know that like Google Street View exists, right? They do blur out license plates, they do blur out faces, all this stuff that's obviously not blurred in the system, which is a search interface where you can search on an address. You cannot search Google Street View for like text on, political signs. And I think it's important to pause here and say like, because some people might push back and say, well, this person literally put something in public for other people to see. Like, why is it a problem that you can find it in a surveillance system? And I would put money on the fact that the person who put up these signs, or in both cases, did not think that they were going to be on screen in an artist talk at MIT like 3 years later, right? Somebody, myself, who has never walked down this street was able to access this. Also, there's a kind of retention here. So maybe this person put the sign up for like a couple days and then decided to take it down. It's memorialized, forever. And also is used in a system by police and private investigators in an enforcement capacity. So it's, I think that there are some issues here. So I wanted to share those issues with a broader public maybe than would be interacting with my artwork. So I wrote an op-ed calling for more regulation, because remember, this system is fully unregulated. There is no legal framework about when you can do these searches. You have to be credentialed to have access to like be able to subscribe to the system, like as a police officer or PI. But once you're in there, you can look up your partner. I mean, there's like no limits on what surveillance you can accomplish. So I wrote an op-ed because I thought I was in a kind of interesting position where almost everyone I imagined who had access to the system was incentivized to keep it this way, like loose and unregulated. It made it a more useful tool, but of course not for me. So I wrote about that. I also worked with 2 investigative reporters for Wired who covered it like in more technical detail. And I didn't know it at the time, but this op-ed really pissed off the New York State Department of State. So that was in September of 2024. I had just done my first exhibition, making the artwork public. And I also had submitted a renewal application for my PI license, because I thought, why not? Let's keep going. And I get this email from the Department of State, Division of Licensing Services, that said, oh, we need a couple more things from you for this renewal. Can you come to this address and just take care of the last steps of your renewal? It's this address in Albany. And I live not so far from there. And I thought, okay, sure, I'll head on down. But very quickly I realized that that was not actually what was going on, because they brought me into this windowless conference room and I turned on the mic on my cell phone. And
You have a seat here.
right here.
Let me let the folks know we're in the room here.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
My name is Jason Bruin. I am an investigator with the Department of State. I would inform you that this meeting is going to be recorded.
Hey, good morning.
So this is Dave Mossberg. He's a supervising attorney with the Department of State.
So I was under investigation. And you might be thinking that would have been like an oh shit moment. And it wasn't like unaffected by the dawning realization in that room that there was a lawyer and New York State's deputy chief investigator sitting across from me. But I have one more 1 minute of audio, which I'll play. And I think you can hear in my voice that I'm also sort of delighted, because what form of engagement is deeper than the close looking of detective work, which is why I was interested in becoming a PI in the first place, is thinking about who gets to look like that and what they do with it. And here's this moment where all of a sudden I realized they were going to be asking those questions with me to try to figure out if I had done something wrong, which I also knew that I hadn't, because as I've just told you, I use the word legal, law, how many times when showing you the work I made with this, because everything was done to the exact letter T of the law to show what is allowed and what is not. So you can hear, like I said, it's about a minute long, this audio, that I'm like, oh my God, what is happening right now?
Well, we're here to talk about a couple of different things. We'll try to compartmentalize them. You are a PI, or a licensed private investigator, and now you've also applied to become document destruction contractor. We'll call that DCC.
We'll come back to that.
So we're also aware that you're an artist. Is that how you define yourself? In terms of your field?
Yes, and also that's how I applied,
Right,
as you can see
right.
in the application.
And we've become aware of that, and we've seen some of the publications that have, and there's also at a gallery, what would you call it, a show, an exhibit?
An exhibition, yeah.
An exhibition. So we're aware of that, and we're aware of some of the articles. I think someone in the art world who runs a gallery wrote an article. I know you wrote an article about that exhibit, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Why don't we do it this way? Why don't you kind of summarize the qualifying experience you utilized? I know you outlined it. We have obviously some documentation, but
Right.
Let's hear it from you.
Yeah, so I think that audio is very rich with some of the nuance here. And of course, it went on for almost 2 hours. That's 1 minute of it, but to give you a sense. So I want to return us to this work that I asked you to keep in your brain, because it's so meta. I found that they were asking me to describe this body of work, and I was articulating this piece to them, which is about government arresting artists and surveilling artists. And they didn't have the irony, but it was a very full circle moment. And they asked some very specific questions and some really broad kind of intellectual questions. And even the specific questions I think are really interesting, because not everybody understands how the art world works. It's a very opaque system. It's very weird. How do artists get paid, and for what, and by whom, and what is it that they're paid for? Is it the object? Is it the expertise? Is it the processes they enact? So even the simple questions are quite confounding, and I think it's an incredible opportunity to like unpack that. And so this is some of the transcript from the interrogation. But so most people, when they walked out of that room, would have just like immediately gotten a lawyer. I went to my studio and immediately started making artwork. And this is one of those pieces because I knew what they were interested in. I knew what they were asking, the questions on their mind, and I knew that I could articulate my answers to those questions most effectively through making artworks. So for example, they were asking me about this show at Rachel Effner Gallery and lots of different questions about that show, and so I just answered it visually. And when I was making this work, the audience I had in mind was not like a visitor to a museum, but it was the administrative judge that I thought might adjudicate this matter. Because if they did sort of take the inquiry to its end, which I assumed would be them trying to revoke this license, then it would go in front of an administrative judge. And so here you're seeing, this is also a photograph of some objects and papers. And I wanted to create a kind of visual world where our two contexts met. So these are like items from my studio, like the cutting mat, but also litigation supplies. So this is called a classification folder, and traditionally it's used by lawyers to organize paperwork for a case. And you'll see there's like a dome magnifier there that highlights the word investigation from the press release. So like the gallery, I did not write that press release. The gallery used the word investigation to describe what it was I was doing. And of course, this was well before I had decided I'm gonna try to apply to become a PI. This is just like what happened in preparation for this exhibition. So there's a couple other works from different projects that they asked me about. This is a project with the city. Here's one with Triple Canopy. Yeah, and there's tons of other work in this, this kind of vein that I made in preparation for a trial. But just for time, I'm gonna move us on to what kind of came out of this, which is that in late April, early May, they dropped the case. Shocker, like, I'd never done anything wrong to begin with. This was a sort of ideological exercise to begin with. And when they told me they were dropping the case, I said, can I have some more information? And they said, you can request your case file. And this is the second full circle moment, because how did I request my case file? Through the Freedom of Information Law, because my case file was a government record. So I got that back, and it was about 250 pages. This is, I just think, like such a nice object, because this is a printout from my gallery's website for the page for that show, the first show I did of my PI work. And just to blow it up a little, it's a little hard to see because also it's in black and white, but that's the self-portrait that I showed you. And on the top, it's got my case file written in handwriting, annotating this printout. And as compelling as I find this is as a document, there were, of the 250 pages, 248 of them were things I already knew, because it showed they were very closely monitoring my public life, like anything I did in my career. But I know all of that because I did all of that, right? There were 2 pages only, really, that showed something beyond that. So the first one was this piece of paper, which, let me get the other one. Sorry, my computer's a little slower than the screen. It is one of the pieces of paper that allowed them to open the investigation. So as part of that process, they put a hold on the ability for that license to renew, for me to apply for more licenses, basically anything they had control over. And you'll notice it says reason for hold, and it just says see me, and it's signed by the Deputy Chief Investigator Goldman. So one strategy when the Freedom of Information Law means that whatever you do can become public is to just not write anything down, right? Verbal conversations can't be foiled. And so I felt that with this page and the next one I'll show you, they were really demonstrating to me that they understood how this worked, and we were like playing chess, right? So the next one was a page of notes taken by Investigator Berendt during that interrogation, and you may notice they are not in English. So the notes were written in Romani, which is the language of the Roma people, and it's very hard to translate because it's a diasporic language. There's many dialects. So just if you're gonna pick a language, like pick one that's also really hard to translate as a strategy for withholding. And also, Berendt used these ciphers, symbolic ciphers, that meant something to him, but not to me or anyone else looking at this. So this is like, you see with the arrow. Also, because some of you at least saw the Golden Centipede show, I will point out that that is triple canopy. Canopy, canopy, canopy. But not written the way that they write it. Okay, so I got 250 pages, 2 of which were interesting. I mean, they're all interesting, but 2 that were like new. And so much that wasn't there, like everything else, right? But most specifically, the thing that was not there was the video of our interrogation. And I just, because I have the receipts, I will remind you that they said this.
I would inform you that this meeting is going to be recorded.
They told me they were making a record, which means they have to give it to me through FOIL, right? So I appealed the FOIL. They denied my appeal. I appealed their denial. And I used a very obscure state law that says, if you're going to deny me again under Public Officer Privacy Law, or sorry, Public Officer Law, Article 6, subsection 89, 3.a, you have to provide a written certification that this thing I'm asking for doesn't exist, which they did. They said this video recording does not exist or cannot be found after diligent search. So there's one universe, in a parallel universe right now, I am suing them because this is illegal, right? They told me they were making a record. Unless somehow, like technical error, they press record, it didn't record, in which case typically you would expect they would just say that because I said in the letter I knew that they had made a recording. But in this other universe, that's over there, the universe that I'm currently living in, I decided actually to just use my powers as an artist to make this video exist because I have an audio recording. So I can bring this to life by making actors mouth the words of this video recording, or this audio recording, videotape it, and I have the video, right? The problem is that I had no record of what they look like besides my own memory because these folks have been fully scrubbed from the internet. They're kind of like the New York Times restaurant critic, like if you know what they look like, they can't do their job, and they didn't give me the video. So I thought, okay, what do people do when they have the memories of what someone looks like, but that's it? And I started thinking about forensic artists who make a sketch when like a witness to a crime needs to like describe the alleged perpetrator. So I got myself some cop software and I made forensic sketches of my interrogators. So this is Goldman and this is Berendt. And in case you were wondering, the software is called SketchCop. And so I use SketchCop to sketch cops. Okay, we are very close out of time, but I want to share one kind of coda to this project because I think, so like one other thing I'm working on now, because I think it really continues to explain the kind of tone with which I'm approaching this. So when I applied to renew my license, you can maybe recall from the audio recording that he said, and you also applied to become a document destruction contractor. So in New York State, you can't destroy something for money without a license for whatever bureaucratic reason. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, like the PI license, a kind of ripe with potential to make artwork using this vocational license. So I created an entity called Credentialed Destructions. I got a DBA and a trade name and all these things in the county in which I lived. And I started creatively destroying things. So here is like a series of file folders like being mowed over by a lawnmower. Here is a box that I impregnated with mushroom spores so that the mushrooms would like destroy, the contents of this box. The ledger on a train track, so it gets destroyed by a speeding train. The point here is that, as with the other project, I became expert level at the licensing law for document destruction contractors, and there is nothing in the law saying how you have to destroy something. And so without that specificity, similar to the PI, where they don't expressly say you cannot get a PI license in order to make artwork, they didn't say you can't use this license to make artwork. And in fact, they left it open as to how you would, what your professional practice would be as a document destruction contractor. So I just really wanted to play with that. So what you're seeing are UV, so these are Polaroids, physical prints that are attached to a photographic mat board. So it's a little hard to tell in documentation, but that's what's going on here. Where the thing that's being destroyed becomes the kind of background for the license, which then is the housing for the Polaroid. But as I said before, I'm not typically satisfied by making something and putting it on the wall. So for me, the thing that I needed to do here was let the state know I was doing this, because they were not able to disenfranchise my ability to do this. They were not successful in their attempt to prevent me from making artwork with professional licenses in the state of New York. And I knew that they read this newspaper, because this op-ed, as I mentioned, really pissed them off. And I know that because in the interrogation, they told me that. So I thought, okay, I know they read the Albany Times-Union, so what I should do is I should take out an ad in the Albany Times-Union telling them that I'm using my document destruction contractor license in order to make artwork. So it's a little hard to see in that view. So this is the ad, and it says, destruction is an art. Any and all methods of destruction are allowed pursuant to the provisions of Article 39G of the General Business Law. If all personally identifying information is rendered unreadable and incapable of reconstruction, New York State Department license number. And there we go. So this is all to say that I just really deeply believe that artists have this power to look at something that other folks are looking at and see a window where there's a door, or find a loophole that no one would ever care to even think about exploiting. And in doing so, we just open up possibilities that might not ever exist otherwise. And I'm particularly interested in doing this in this particular moment where we are living in a very dark time, and there's lots of work, lots of people are doing in lots of different ways to try to address that. And I think one underutilized way is to just be a chaos agent within the rules, do things that are allowed, but that totally disrupt systems or stretch them in such a way where it reveals their breaking point. And so in that way, I'm excited to be an artist in this moment in time, and it makes me feel like there's a lot more trouble ahead that is good trouble. So I think I will leave it there, and we can do some questions, Emily. Yeah?
I'd like to welcome anyone to ask any questions that they'd like, and I'll pass them in. Or maybe Cassidy will with that one. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. There we go. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Fabulous work. Really cool. Couple of things. I used to work for the city of Boston, so totally get what is cool about working within the context of public administration. But now I'm doing a long-term performance piece with the MBTA, where I've decided to get professionally licensed to drive and operate a bus.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
Yes, we should do a group show.
Right, exactly. So, but I wanted to ask, how did you decide what small artifacts to capture in the process of doing this documentation? I noticed that you took a really beautiful picture of your licensure and all of those kinds of, the collage work that you did that eventually led to the photograph. How did you discern what was useful and what might not be?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I keep everything, but I don't exhibit much of the ephemera. I am fortunate that I get asked to speak about my work a lot, maybe because it's super confusing to a lot of people. There's a lot to unpack, and so I love bringing it into, sorry, I just lost my mic here. I love bringing it into that context. But what I typically do in the work that I exhibit is think about which of those artifacts helps explain or tell the story or give a kind of like narrative richness to the extensive lived life that made the work. And there's such a temptation to include like every scrap of paper because it's like the beauty of this, the bureaucratic, mechanisms can be really seductive. But I try to not like fetishize the ephemera and actually use it as a vehicle for exposition. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, Cassidy.
I'm just really in awe of this
you.
work. My thoughts run this way frequently, and I do have some experience with document destruction. Did you check that all the ways you destroy documents are legal?
Yeah, so they make 3 suggestions of the methods. It's shredding, pulverizing, and burning, but the rest of that sentence is like what's in the ad, which is that all other methods are valid so long as the personally identifying information has been destroyed and
I don't want to be a pill, but I just got to ask, the ledger you had on the train track, it didn't seem to me that the train would necessarily destroy it. I mean,
No, it's a great question, because I've been thinking about that for this series. So like, for example, this is my crossbow. So I wanted to destroy something using my crossbow. So I think of these images as proposals for destruction that could be used as advertising images to continue to troll the state of New York. So there are going to be ones in here that, like the mushroom spores, like I'm sure it's not going to like fully eradicate all personally identifying information, but it's a proposal for something that like with enough rigor, you could get there with the mushrooms. I did not, the mushrooms were hard, like truly. Meredith knows, she's in the audience, because I would call her up and be like, my husband is literally gonna divorce me because of trying to make these mushrooms work. But yeah, I think about these as advertising images. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for a really exciting talk. I had a specific question about some of the residence work that you did at the Records Department. There's a rich history in New York City of artist government, interactions and clashes. And so, one, do you have any other big stories of that? And the one that comes to mind is, did you run into the Richard Serra debacle?
Yeah, the like people pissing on the tilted arc. Yeah. Yeah, so I didn't actually find for that one. It may have also been that, I'm sure there was like a public forum for that, but I believe it was on private property maybe. But I don't have anything on that. But the thing that's amazing, about the archive is because of New York's place in the cultural ecosystem, like pretty much like every, not every, many significant artists have passed through there at least at some point in their career. So a couple highlights are actually in Rubrics, which is here on campus. Chris Kraus, the artist and writer, was given like a 3 out of 5 for the quality of her work. Similarly, in that work, Philip Lorca de Corsia is given a very low score. Mel Chin was someone in Critique that the quote was, "There's no one has strong feelings in support of this artist." And then the one that I do try to always mention too is in Critique, Faith Ringgold is given a really racist critique. They call her work ethnocentric and flat, and all of these sort of disparaging terms, suggesting that it would not be of interest except to a very small community, because it was in consideration for like a public artwork. So I basically made the effort to always obscure the names of the artists in the works, unless they were super famous, in which case it helps show that like often these systems are rigged or racist, because obviously Faith Ringgold is a master at or was a master of her craft, and it's useful in that context. But otherwise, I try to keep the anonymity if the name is not going to help.
Any other questions? Well, we're about right at time, so it's at 7:30, and I want to give just a huge thank you for you sharing your work and kind of where it's gone today. So thank you so much, Julia,
Yeah.
for joining us
Thank
tonight.
you for having me.